Okay. Hello. August Voltigris. Lederhol. Odik Dodoslav. Lederhol. Koshtanay. Lederhol. Odik Dodoslav. Love. Love. Daslav. Odik Daslav. Odik Daslav. Kochtanay. Odik Do Daslav. Bios. Thank you. What was all that about? Well, it's about communication. And it's about making sure that when you're delivering your message, you're not making assumptions about how that communication could work. That was limited success. I had one person carry out what it was I was asking you to do. By the way, that was my assumption was that when you came in here, you probably wouldn't expect me to be speaking in Irish with a Munster dialect, which is what that was supposed to be. If you do speak that, I apologise for what I've just done to your language. And you probably assumed when you came in here I'd speak to you in English, and I didn't. And that just goes to show what happens when we make some assumptions about communication and how things can break down. We had limited success with someone saying, or someone following my instruction to please raise your right hand. Odik Dodath Love. Lederhol. And that's what I want to cover today, really. It's about the communication process. It's not about your content of what you deliver. It's not about the style in which you deliver it. It's about how that communication process works between you and your client, you and your student. And what we can do to improve the quality of that so that we can improve the value of what we deliver. And here's a little equation, because I'm going to be talking about value through the course of this talk. And how do you measure value? What is value? And this equation for me sums it up really well. So value, to me, of any product or service is equal to the quality of the delivery of that product or service delivered by the price you charge for it. Pretty straightforward, but I think you can apply that to just about everything you can think of. Which means if you want to increase the value of your communication, you've got two options. You can either reduce the price you charge, which if you're a business is a dumb thing to do, and certainly in skydiving there's not enough money to be made being a coach, so you wouldn't want to reduce the price. Or you can improve the quality of that communication process to improve the value of that communication. And why do we want to improve the value? Because all economic and scientific studies show that money flows to the provider of highest value. So if you can increase the value of what you deliver, why wouldn't you want to do that? Before I go on, I need to give you a word of warning. I'm not a social scientist, I'm not a cognitive therapist, I'm not an educationalist, I'm just someone who's interested in this. And I do have a little knowledge, so it could be dangerous. But let me just qualify that. You're probably asking this question yourself. Why would you want to listen to me if I don't know what I'm talking about? You could ask that for a lot of these seminars, I think, maybe. There's some reasons. I've coached people over many, many years. In business, I've coached teams and individuals who went on to be highly successful in business. And I've coached a number of skydivers too. I can see one or two sitting in the audience here, who've gone on to medal at the Nationals. So I've got some history in doing this. More importantly to me was I've been coached by skydivers. And being on the receiving end of this is what turned me onto the communication process, made me fascinated by it. An example here, I was on a team and we were coached by two world champion skydivers from the same team. They had the same information, same experience, same knowledge, and yet one would talk to us as a team and we get it, and one would talk to us, the other one would talk to us, and we really were at sea. We didn't know what he was trying to get us to do. Not really. And that triggered me into thinking, well, why is it these people with the same information, with the same level of world-class experience, aren't able to communicate in the same way? So I started to look into that. And as part of that, I've gone off and looked into the coaching process, the Association of Professional Coaches in the UK, done an awful lot of research. And I'm going to share some of that with you in a moment. And finally, I've always been really, really keen on helping people develop, right from the days when I was a technician and people would give me an apprentice to coach right through to the current time. And a teammate of mine summed it up pretty well. One year when we were at the Nationals, we were competing with a team that was on the creepers, and I could see they were doing something wrong. So I went over and started to help them. And my teammate said, you know that, Chris, he just can't help helping. And that's kind of stuck with me for the rest of my career. It's true. That's why I'm here today. I can't help helping. So this is what I want to cover. And how I want to do that is to look at each of these steps and, if you like, give you an opportunity to take away some tools from this that you could put into your own coaching. As I say, not trying to change the way, or not trying to change the content or the style of your coaching, but just think about the way you can deliver that message to get more effect with your students. So let's look at the first one. How do we get information to stick? It's pretty important that when we spend time with somebody, passing that information on, they get to remember what that information is. So, learning curve. We all know the learning curve looks something like that. Developed about 130 something years ago. The same guy, Ebbinghaus, also came up with this. And this is much more relevant to us as skydivers, because the forgetting curve looks like this. Basically, what that is saying is at the beginning of the day, if I give you 100% of content, by the end of the day you might remember 20% of it, and by the end of the week you might remember about 10%, and then that 10% probably just stays ad infinitum. So as coaches, as instructors, how often do we see our clients? If we see them once a week, we're doing well. So think about how that sort of forgetting curve applies to the information you give to your students, your clients. Now this forgetting curve assumes that at the end of the day, you go one way, your student goes the other, nothing happens in between to reinforce the information, and you come back together in a week's time. So we're going to look at ways of trying to raise this level of the forgetting curve by doing some things in between now and a week's time. So, overcoming that forgetting curve, this information predominantly comes from a book called Making It Stick, about 5 years old, and also uses some of the nudge theory, if you're familiar with nudge theory. If not, it's a really simple read, I would recommend it. But I've pulled out 4 things from this that we can apply ourselves in our everyday coaching in skydiving. The first is recognizing that something that you make easy to learn is actually really easy to forget, because what happens is it goes into short-term memory and out the other side. So you need to engage your client without making the learning process too difficult. You need to engage them into using their cognitive abilities to work stuff out themselves. And a really simple example of this that's given in the book is 2 random groups selected. Each were given a paragraph to read with information in, and each were going to be tested on the content of that information. One group had the information written in a really easy font to read. The other group had a more challenging font that you had to work out what was being said. It wasn't too difficult, but they had to think about what was being said as well as work out the font. And you can guess at the end of the day, when both groups were tested, it was the group that had the difficult font that remembered much more than the ones that had the easy font. In and out, easy to learn, easy to forget. So think about that when you're putting your briefings together. Second one is allowing your student to use their own words. In a lot of businesses, and particularly, someone's not here, particularly in skydiving, we've got abbreviations and languages and a dialogue all of our own. And we know it, but maybe the students don't. And we do like them to repeat back to us the way we've said things. But sometimes it's a much better idea to get them to think about what you've said and to put it in their own words. And that way, the cognitive processes are working, and it goes from short-term memory into long-term. To reinforce that, asking them to retrieve information is really, really useful. And that's not just getting the book out and checking they still remember it, because that's basically easy in, easy out. This process works by saying, well, I've given you some information. I'd like you to retrieve that information in about 5 minutes' time. Just give it back to me. And then maybe in an hour's time, retrieve it and give it back. And then maybe at the end of the day, and in 3 days, at the end of a week. So you're not looking at it regularly every 2 minutes. You spread that retrieval process out. And that's the way you get information into long-term memory. And you can couple that with testing. So when you do your retrieval, in 5 minutes, in an hour, just check on what you've retrieved and how well it matches what you were supposed to retrieve. Because that way you can work out what you didn't retrieve, and you can work on that for the hour's time and then for the 2 days' time. Is this making sense? Yeah, good. So there's 4 things you could think about doing when you're putting your briefings together. Get your students to challenge them a little bit so they get engaged. Get them to repeat back in their own words what you've said. Retrieve at the end of the day, 2 days, 5 days, and so on, and test themselves while they do that. All that's going to lift that forgetting curve that we looked at. So using that technique and then thinking about how we can add further value to the communication process, there's a quote here, which basically says the same thing. The more you involve somebody in the process, the more they'll remember. And although it's a proverb, it's been scientifically proven too. So Flanagan in 97 came up with this. And as you can see, basically, the more you get your student involved in things, speak, say, hear, do, blah, 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 read, the more of their processes that they use, the more they will remember. 90% was the figure he found across a wide range of different people. Have we got any teachers here? Yeah, at the back. The VARC process. Anyone know about the VARC, the visual, audio, reading and kinesthetic way of teaching? That's built into this. I think it's falling out of favour now, isn't it, Mary? It's not quite so.
I think it's still encouragement to use a whole range of processes.
Okay. But it's a subset of this, really. It's been used extensively in teaching. So again, think about when it comes to briefing your students, how much of this are you getting them to do? You might like them on a creeper, get them to do the physical stuff, but are they doing all of this to get that retention rate up? Right, I want to look a little bit about next what's going on in the brain when we're coaching and getting information. Okay, so bear with me on this one. I'm not going to go too deeply on it. So here's a picture of the brain. We're looking at the top of the brain. So the eyes are down here at the bottom. And just to make life really easy for you, the left side of the brain is on the right and the right side is on the left. Okay. And what you can see here is the blue part. If you can read those, I think you can read all of that. That's the logical side of the brain. That's the analytical side of the brain. It's where the verbal stuff goes on. So it's the part of the brain I hope is working for you now while I'm talking to you. On the pinker side, on the right there, sorry, on the left there, that's the part of the brain which is what we're trying to get to when we're teaching skydiving skills. It's where the intuitive side of the brain is, where you've got the spatial relationships and the creative side. And when we're trying to get students to do things, we're trying to get information into that part of the brain so that the moves they make become intuitive. So just hold that for a moment, and we'll look at one other thing, and then we'll bring this back. And it's about the 3 stages of motor skills and the way it's learnt. There's the cognitive side. What is it I need to learn as a motor skill? I'm only talking about motor skills now. Okay, now I know what it is. I need to practice that. And when I get to the practice end, and I'm getting really good at this, we get to the flow state. And this is physical flow state. It's not quite As you can see, this was from 1964, this came up, purely looking at motor skills. You might be familiar with Mihaly, Sixth Sense Mihaly flow, his little matrix of skill levels versus challenge. I think that was in the BPA mag last year. That's a superset of this, but it's the same sort of thing. You're in the zone here, physical zone. So those are the three stages. Let's just map what's going on in our brains during those processes. It looks like this. At the start, the cognitive side, as I'm talking to my student, they're using that left brain. That's the logical, analytical, verbal side of the brain. As they get through practice, eventually they get to the intuitive side, the right side of the brain, and they get into the flow state because everything becomes very natural for them. As coaches, we can put roadblocks on this without knowing we're doing it. And it happens in the practice phase. So if you're coaching a student and you see them doing something wrong, maybe you're on a creeper, or a team making the wrong move, you talk to them. If you talk to them, you're engaging the left side of their brain, the verbal side. So although they're trying to get this way, by you talking to them at the learning stage, you're pushing them back this way. So what could you do about that? Speak as little as possible during the learning phase and engage them maybe physically more, demonstrate more. And if that isn't working, stop the whole thing, get off the creepers, whatever you're doing, get back over here again, have a talk about it, and then get back into the practice phase. Otherwise, the more you're trying to help, the more difficult you're making the whole thing for your student. Does this make sense? Yeah. But it's worse than that, because you know what students are like sometimes. When you ask them to do something, they'll start to tell you about their own performance while they're doing it. Oh, I didn't get that right. Oh, can I just try that one again? Which means they're doing exactly the same thing. They are talking to you because they're using their analytical part of their brain to say, this isn't working. And they're talking to you, so they're using the verbal side of their brain, and they're pushing themselves back this way. And so the more you speak and the more they speak during the practice phase, the more you're holding them back. That's what this is proposing. Anyone here on a 4-way team, 8-way team, or been on one? Yeah? Okay. Just think about this when you're doing your first walkthrough of your dirt dive. Because that's the time you're kind of more relaxed about the dirt dive, aren't you? And that's probably when you talk about it. And what you're doing is you're pushing yourself over here and not allowing yourself to get to the flow state. So take more time on that first walkthrough, say less, and you should get here quicker. If it all goes wrong, stop, go back here, talk about it, and then start again. That's what I'm suggesting. Okay, so we want to get information across, but how much information can we give people at any one time? This was summed up for me 18 years ago by the Stereophonics album. Just enough information, right? That's all you need to give them. If you give them too much, overloads. But how much is enough? Have you heard of Miller's rule of 7 plus or minus 2? No? Okay. So 60-something years ago, he carried out a number of experiments on a wide range of people and came to the conclusion, rightly, that most people can remember 7 bits of information. Some can remember 9, some can only remember 5. But by and large, most people can retain 7 bits of information. Okay? What does that mean to us? Well, it means when we're structuring our briefings, maybe we should think about what these 7 bits are. Okay, so it's a shame you're leaving because we were about to play a game. Oh, he's on the phone. So what I want to do is play a game with you on this subject, okay? So what I'm going to do is show you some information. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds, and then I'm going to see whether you can remember that information at the end of it. There are no prizes except bragging rights in the bar tonight. It would be, someone's got their phone out, so you're not allowed to cheat on this one. Nigel's got his phone out too. So if you're recording anything, I would prefer you not to. I'm going to show it to you about 10 seconds, and then we're going to see who can remember it. I'll be ready. Okay, go. Who thinks they've got it? Who thinks they remembered it all? 2 people? Great. We'll see in a minute. Okay. There's a lot to take in. How many digits were there? 10. Yep. Okay, so it's an overload of the 7 plus or minus 2. Let's see whether you were right. Just think about that number again, and I'm going to show it to you. Okay. Now, when I've used this before, almost everyone who's got this number right have done one of 2 things. The first is they've gone, well, that's actually 72, 50, 93, blah, blah, blah. 98, sorry, 31. They've split the 10 numbers into 5 pairs and remembered each pair. So they've just remembered 5 bits of information, which kind of bears out what Miller said. And the other people who can remember the number generally look for a pattern in there that means something to them. So 3164 might be somebody's birthday, and they remember that as just one thing. So they're only remembering 7 bits of information, not 10.
Similar sort of thing, split it into 3 groups, just like you would a phone number.
Yeah. A lot of foreign numbers are written as digits of 2, aren't they? Yeah. So you split it up.
4, 3, 4, 4, 3, 5.
You're going to find this next test easy because we've got another one, okay? Same idea, different information. Give you about 10 seconds to see whether you can remember it. Ready? Go. Anyone get that one? Most people? It's not a trick, it's less to remember. It's so much easier, isn't it? If it's so much easier, then why aren't we thinking about putting our briefings together with just 5 chunks of information for our students to learn, our clients to learn? There's the thought. That was it. Yep, 92047, all got that one. Good. So let's just hold the 7 bits of information, plus or minus 2, but we'll hold that point for a moment. I'm going to just add something to it in a moment. It's called primacy and recency. Anyone here done any professional presentation training? No? Oh, well, come and see me afterwards, because that's a sideline of mine. But if you had done, your presentation coach should have said to you, when you're putting your presentation together, make sure that the first thing you do is very strong and the last thing you do is very strong. Primacy first, recency the last, because those are the things that people remember when they go away. So with that information, if we were to plot, and I'm going to use 7 as the average number of bits of information people can remember, if we were to plot those here against the retention rate, it looks a bit like this. So people remember the first things and the last things, and in the middle, they tend not to remember very much at all, or much less, with the assumption that you do nothing at this point to raise their retention rate. You just give them the information and they remember this and this, and they'll struggle with this bit. So how does that apply to skydivers, coaches, instructors? I'll give you a crude example. I'm going to talk about an FS1 360-degree turn brief. I'm going to break it into 7 bits, and the 7 bits are the exit, the stop on heading, input to make the turn, input to stop, altitude awareness, turn track wave and pull, canopy flight and landing. That's 7 bits of information. That's the logical, chronological order, right? But what I've put in that order, if I was to brief it in that way, I've put the exit up here, which is probably not where you want to put it, because you're trying to teach them a new skill, which is how to make a 360-degree turn, which is a start and stop bit, which is some way down the order that I went through. So maybe what you could do, if you were thinking about using this rule when you're giving your briefing, is pull out the new information you're trying to get and put it right up the front. Turn track wave and pull, canopy flight, pretty important. Keep them here. And at this point, you might want to be thinking, well, maybe I'll do the exit at this point and we'll go somewhere different. We'll go to the mock-up and we'll practice some physical stuff which will help retain this bit here. Okay, so that's the briefing side of it. And then when you come to walk it all the way through, sure, you'll do the whole thing in a chronological order. But when you come to brief it, just think about you want to put the most complex information for your client up the front and see whether that works. Still with me? Yeah, good. People are nodding off to sleep or just nodding, I don't know. So these next couple of sections I want to cover is about us all being prisoners of our own experience. What I mean by that is we see the world from the way we see the world, which may not be the same way as other people see it. But it's really difficult to see it through somebody else's experience. Okay? So I want to look at, first off, appreciating how we learn. I'm going to feel intimidated with two teachers at the back, because there's lots of different theories on learning, and I'm just going to pick on one, and I've picked on this one because we can use it in our briefings as skydivers. It's called the format system, developed by Bernice McCarthy, and it looks a bit like this. Not everybody learns the same way. We all have a predominant way we like to learn. To start with, there are why people. They like to know why they need to do something before they'll do it. Then there are what people, who need to know not so much why, but what it is they have to do. And if you were to put a laptop and a manual for that laptop next to a what person, they will read the manual and then play with the laptop. Then you get the how people. They want to know how to get on and do it. So the same laptop, same manual, they'll go straight to the laptop. If they can't get it to work, they'll have a look at the manual. They're much more interested in getting on with it. And then you get what if people who, yeah, it's why, what and how, I understand all of that, but what if I was to do something different? Can I challenge all these precepts? And the why, what, how, and what if come from Bernice McCarthy's studies. The innovative and analytic, the common sense people, dynamic people comes from a UK guy, PhD student I read, who did his own analysis and came up with actually the same 4 categories, but he just called them something different. Just to give you a slight understanding how these differ, looking at the format system, if we imagine this vertical line is the way in which people process information, from feeling through to thinking, perceive information, not process, perceive. This horizontal line is how they process that information. And it divides the quadrant up into different ways of doing things, as you can see. And if we take those 4 categories, the why, what, how, and what if, we can plot them on here, they look like this. And you can see that's why different learning styles require a different approach, because people are processing and perceiving information differently in the 4 quadrants. So I've got about 30 people in here at the moment, maybe let's say it's 40. So the 40 people would probably break down in that sort of ratio. Okay, so got it. I'm going to assume you're one of these people, you're a Y person. And your predominant learning style is Y. There's a very good chance that because you're a prisoner of your own experience, you will try and coach in the Y frame, in using the things that you're familiar with and feel right to you. That is the biggest chunk, Y people. But if Rajesh did that, he's missing 65% of an audience, or potentially missing all of those. He's not making that connection with them. Remember that story I gave you right at the beginning with those 2 world-class skydivers? One connected, one didn't. It's because one was able to do all of these things, to talk to the team, and one just had one way. He was a prisoner. He had just one way of talking. So if we know this, how are we going to use it in every day? How are we going to maximise this communication value? So for Y people, we need to discuss with them the reasons they need to do something. Why are there 8 levels of AFF? Why are there 10 levels of FS1 or whatever it is? This is why we do it. For the what people, we would be saying, well, these are the 10 levels. And this is what we do at each level. And for the how people, this is how we're going to tackle each of those. We're going to do this, and then this, and then this. And for level 1, you'll do this. You start to make it much more real for them. And then for the what if people, you give them all that information and you just wait. Because these are the people that can seem like a real pain. Mary's smiling. You must have come across these, Mary. These are the people that go, yeah, that's all very well, but what if I didn't do that? What if I tried something else? Now, as a coach, as an instructor, when you get a student like this, or a team like this, it can feel really threatening. Because you've got all that experience, you've got all that knowledge, you want to help them, and they're going, yeah, but what if I didn't do that? What if I tried something else? And it's really important to allow them to do that, because their process is to say, well, yeah, I know why, what, and how, but I need to explore the boundaries, which is why they're dynamic. And once they've explored the boundaries, you can bring them back to what you want them to do. I'll tell you a little story. I see we've got time. On a training camp in DeLand with a very famous coach, 4-way team. We're 2 or 3 days into the camp, and we're dirt diving some stuff. We're on the creepers, and the coach says, right, outside centre, I'd like you to do this move here. And he's gone, okay, does it. What if I did it this way, though? And the coach says, well, yeah, you could do, but in my view, it's much better to do the other one. And this is like the touch paper. Well, yeah, but what if I didn't do it your way? What if I was to do it my way? Well, look, I've been coaching a long time, and I think it's really right that you should do it my way. Yeah, but I want to try it my way. And this escalated. You know, the rest of the team were kind of, Nigel, you might remember this because you were there. We were kind of looking at our shoes, and the coach was not somebody you'd expect to ramp it up. And he only diffused it in the end by saying, look, I've been on the British team this many years, I've done this, I've won these medals, I coached people like this, and I'm saying you should do it this way. And the outside centre said, okay, I'll do it your way. He wasn't given the room, the outside centre, to go, yeah, maybe actually, coach, you were right. I've tried it my way, but I can see why your way is better. And that's what can happen if you're passing this information to someone and they challenge you back. It feels like a challenge. Okay, so just to summarise then, when you're putting your brief together, think about explaining why to your students, to your clients, what you have to do, and then what it is you're going to do, how they're going to do it, and then maybe give them that room, that time to be able to ask what if. Yeah?
Those what if people are normally also, if you give them the space, they will give them the answer themselves.
Very often they will come back to the answer themselves, yes, because they look at this and go, yeah, I can see now. Yeah. And in that story I told, the outside centre, when we landed after the jump, that was the right move. Okay, so I want to carry on this theme of being a prisoner of your own experience and look at what drives people, what motivates people. And this comes from a book called Words That Change Minds. Really fascinating book, but I've pulled just these 2 bits out because we can apply them in our everyday coaching. I'm going to look at internal and externally driven people. And it says there, I hope you can read this at the back, that the internally driven people just know they're doing the right thing. They measure their success by what they feel and see and do. They know they've done a good job. Whereas the externally driven people, quite the reverse, they need someone to tell them that they're doing a good job. Neither's right or wrong, neither's better or worse. Same with those 4 learning styles. Neither's right or wrong, neither's better or worse. They are just different, and that's what we're recognising here. They are different. So what does this mean? Well, when you're talking to them, you will hear them say, the internally driven people, these sorts of words in red. And those are the words that if you use back to them, they will respond to. So you can reach out, you can grasp, it's up to you, blah, 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 those sorts of things. So you'll know you've done a good job. Whereas the externally driven people will have a different set of words. Others will see. You'll get some great feedback. You can see those sorts of words are completely diametrically opposed. And you do get people like this in the team. I've coached teams who've had this mix of people, and it can be really challenging. Normally about 40% are here and 40% of here of any audience, and 20% are a mixture of the two. Now, I'm an internally driven person, So I would be very happy coaching people this way. But I would be missing 40% of communication success if I did that. I need to think about using these kinds of words as well. Does this all make sense? Still with me? Yeah? Good. So all this information is going to be on the BPA website. So you'll be able to review this and think about the words you might want to use. So one more, which is people who are driven towards things versus people who are driven away from things. And the people who are driven towards things, their motivation is to achieve success and hit that objective. People who are driven away from things are really looking to avoid failure and find problems, solve problems. So again, there's a set of words that you will hear them use that you can use back to them to make that connection, to add that value to the communication. So for the driven towards people, it is about you can have this, you can include it, you can get your objective, you can meet the target. It's all about obtaining things. Whereas for the driven away from people, it's all about avoiding failure. It's about preventing things, rectifying and stopping things. And again, you can see these are going in different directions. I think I'm probably a driven towards person, and if I didn't use these words when briefing a team, I would be missing out on opportunity. And yeah, I've got time for one more story here. I was coaching a team. I was player coach on the team. And I said to the outside centre, what's your objective for the year? He said, right, I want to go to the nationals for the team to have this kind of average. To get to that point, I want to be able to go to this competition and this competition. I want us to be jumping these many weekends between now and the nationals. I want to do these many jumps in a day and this much tunnel time. And it was just like, for me, it's one of these, that's just perfect. Said to Tail, this is honestly true, I said to Tail, what's your objective for the year? And she said, I don't want to fuck up. That was it. That was her objective. So you've got outside centre seeing all this stuff and she just doesn't want to make mistakes. Clearly one of these. So as a coach, how do you deal with that? You have to find the right form of words to be able to fix a problem that's obviously existing in the team. And if I just, as I said before, if I just went down my route the way I'm happy, Tail would never pick up on it. So you might be able to come up with a phrase that says something like, okay, so we want to go to the nationals with this kind of average. That's going to take some effort, and we need to put some steps in between. But if we put those steps in between, and we do these many jumps on the weekend, what we can do is we can fix our exits, we can prevent losing those first 10 seconds out of the door, and we can start to rectify the problems that we see in the tunnel. So I've now hopefully put my arms around all the team and used the right form of words to get them all on side to do the plan. Okay.
Do we hold the questions for the last bit?
Can you just hang on, because I'm nearly finished. I'm nearly finished. Thank you. Okay. So I've thrown a lot at you. That's all I wanted to throw at you. Hopefully you'll be able to look at this and go through, I could use that, I can take this away. All right, I'll need to do something in order to change the way I communicate, but my content, my style can still be the same. I just use some of these tools to be more effective in delivering it. And this is what I've covered, just to remind you all. The smarter people amongst you will go, yeah, he's put 7 bits of information up on the board, because I'm going with 7 plus or minus 2. And I've put this stuff at the front for primacy because I think the forgetting curve and making stuff stick is pretty important. And these different drivers at the end are really important too. So what did I put in the middle? I put the sequencing of information and the rule of 7 plus or minus 2, where we played the little game of trying to remember stuff. So I've tried to raise the retention rate in that part of the middle of today in order to, you can go away with more value. I haven't covered sharpen the saw. I'm going to do that in a minute. The really observant ones amongst you will probably have heard me say why, what, how, and what if. I even did that in the why, what, how, and what if section. And you can look back on the video and check if you want. I started by saying, why would you want to listen to me? What are we going to cover today? So with a bit of practice, you can use these tools to deliver whatever information you want. And I've done it because I think I want you to take away the most value you can from today. Kind of Darren Browned you, haven't I, if you know what he does. Okay, so last point, sharpen the saw. It's a story by Professor Stephen Covey. Has anyone heard of Professor Stephen Covey? Brilliant, great. So Stephen Covey came up with what he calls the 7 steps of highly effective people. And this is step 7. We're not going to talk about 1 to 6. We're going to just look at 7. But what he did, how he developed these 7 steps, 7 habits of highly effective people, is he modelled successful people, business people, sports people, teachers, analysts, all sorts of different people, and said, you know what, all of these different people do these 7 things the same way. So if I can turn that into habits, then out of the end will come a successful person. This is habit number 7, sharpen the saw. And the story goes like this. He's out one day walking, because it's a lovely day, sunny, blue sky, he's off into the woods, and he's walking through the woods and he hears something, commotion up ahead. So he's inquisitive, so he goes off to look and see what's going on. Gets to a clearing, and across the clearing, you see there's a woodsman sawing away. Great big tree, great big saw, really hot and bothered woodsman. So Covey goes over to him and says, that looks like a tough job. He said, I've been at it all morning. He says, well, you haven't got very far, have you? Is that a tough old tree, is it? And the woodsman says, no, it's the saw. So Covey says to him, what's wrong with the saw? And the woodsman says, it's blunt. So Covey says, why don't you sharpen the saw? And woodsman says, I haven't got time, I'm too busy sawing. Right? So ask yourselves a question. Are you too busy to sharpen your saw? Do you take the time to think about keeping your saw as sharp as you possibly can? And to that effect, hopefully, today, if you can take 1, 2, or all 7 of those things I've covered today away and apply them to what you do, your saw will be a little sharper. Also, hopefully, if I could ask you to do just 2 things for me, think about what you've heard me say today and put it in your own words, process it, use your cognitive skills, and also retrieve the information, as I mentioned. Maybe before you go to the next talk, and then maybe after that talk, just think about what those 7 things were, and then the end of today, and then on Monday, and then this time next week. Give yourself that opportunity to keep your saw sharp. Right, just before I finish then, take us back to where we started with this formula. Thinking about the value of the communications that you give to your client. Looks like this. The quality of the briefings you give divided by the price you charge for that equals the value that you offer. I'm hoping today that you'll think, I can add more quality to what I do by using some of these tools. Thank you. We do have time for a few questions. If you could wait for the microphone to arrive, then we can record your question. Yes, thank you. That's right.
Where's the question?
Thank you so much. Oh, that's loud. I'll hold it over here. Just a comment, really. The fixed models that you showed, driven away from and driven towards. The person that was dead keen had got it all planned out, and the person that just had the let's not fail attitude. One of the things in my experience is I find that's dynamic. So as the person that had the let's not fail attitude learns greater skills, they tend to gain more confidence and become a driven towards rather than a driven away from person. So just something to add to the toolbox.
Can I just top and tail that a bit? Anyone familiar with neuro-linguistic programming? Yeah? Well, one of the things they say is if you ask someone for their objectives and they come out driven away from, you ask them to continue to repeat those objectives until they start to become positive rather than negative, and in the end, as you say, they become positive as people. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, it's all about the same topic actually, about the driven
Yeah.
driven away and driven towards. What's your opinion or experience if you confront them with it? So in the example, you could explain to the outside center and to the tail what kind of person they are and why you have to explain it in separate versions.
Do I confront them with it?
Yeah, or inform them about it. Makes it the team stronger. If they know that, if I know that my tail is a driven away person, I can understand that the coach takes a different approach.
Confront is a very strong word.
Yeah, okay, but I'm not native English, so.
Okay. But yes, I have done. And I've even preempted it by being on a team and knowing the people on the team and have said, right, I've worked out you're a towards, you're an away from, you're a why, you're a what. And I've sat down when we started our team plan for the year and said, this is my view of how I think you are. Am I right? And generally people go, yeah, that's me. So, well, that's going to mean the dynamics in the team are like this. So with that, the team that were going in different directions, I didn't confront anyone, but what I did do was use the words to encourage everyone to be together. And then over time, you start a dialogue and say, do you know, Tail, maybe you could think like this because it's not wrong to think the way you're doing, but as somebody else said, you can start to work towards it.
Confront is not the right word, but in other words, I think it can make the team stronger if they,
yes, it can
know
do.
it from each other.
Yes,
So
absolutely. One over the back there.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think you've just ripped up my methods of instruction lecture, and I'm going to use yours now. One of the things I find is, as chief instructor, is I think I have a what instructor come to me with a what if student, labeling them a troublemaker and having to manage that. And I think this lecture will help a lot of instructors negotiate that path. So thank you.
It's really hard because sometimes they are difficult. It's not that they're what if people, but they can just be belligerent. And it's giving them enough time and space so you find out what they are and allow them to come back to do what you want them to do. Thanks. Right, we've probably got time for one more if you need one more. Any more questions? All right, well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.